Hello everyone, and welcome to my presentation on Noah and God's flood. The background: the account of Noah and the flood can be found in Genesis chapter 6 through Genesis chapter 9. Noah was commanded to build the ark and then put two of every kind of animal on it. It rained for 40 days and 40 nights, and then water covered the rest of the earth for 150 days, and then it took another 220 days for the land to fully dry out. The covenant of God with Noah at the end, after the ark landed, was with a rainbow being the symbol that God would never flood the earth again. The flood, there's a growing view that it is being a localized incident just in that region, which at the time was the Middle Eastern region. So Iraq, Mesopotamia, Israel, Saudi Arabia, that kind of part of the world. But if you look at it, if the mountain peaks are covered like the Bible says they were, under 25 feet of water, then there was no reason the flood couldn't have been worldwide. It had to be worldwide for the water to be able to be that tall above the mountaintops. In the Bible, there's a Hebrew word, kol. It means all or everything, and then generally it is taken literally when translated, unless the context on either end of it implies otherwise. So when the Bible talks about the flood, that word is used. So it means the whole world was covered. While the earth was flooded, a lot of stuff happened. Non-creationalists say the sediment layers that we see today through canyons, mountains, just in the ground, were laid over millions of years. But the waters, the movement of the waters around the whole earth, carved out canyons and built up layers that eventually formed mountain and landscape. And the deposits tons of sediment onto the bodies of dinosaurs and stuff, and that's how you have the fossils we have today. It was from that vast amount of material being dumped and the animals being alive when they were buried, essentially, or very soon after death. The ark itself, in recent decades, there has been a loose replica of the ark constructed by the Ark Encounter in Williamston, Kentucky. When Noah was told to build the ark, he was told it had to be 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high. So that's equivalent. A cubit at the time was from your elbow to your middle finger, which was, kind of everyday use. Somebody would use it that way. And then for larger projects like the ark would have been, they had what they called the royal cubit. That would have been the same measurement plus your 4 fingers. And the Ark Encounter used, I believe, was a 17-inch elbow to middle finger plus the 4 fingers, which I believe they said was 4 inches. And that came out to about 510 feet long, 85 feet wide, and 51 feet tall. We accounted for, room the curvature of the bow of the ship and the stern of the ship, or the ark in this case. That comes to 1.88 million cubic feet, or the volume of 450 semi-trailers. You look at all the species and stuff, you were able to condense it down to like around 6,700 animals were probably on board the ark. And one of the reasons they could do that was they brought on very young animals or adolescent animals. Then that way, after the flood and the ark landed again, that also would give those animals more time to reproduce and fill the earth again. there have been many instances where we've been trying to find the ark. Um, Genesis 8:4, the excerpt from that says the mountains of Ararat. So you have the mountains of Ararat, which is like the mountain chain, kind of like you have the Rocky chain of mountains here in the U.S. Not just one mountain. Several expeditions have been sent to try to find the ark in what is modern-day Turkey. But as the years have gone, it's gotten harder and harder to do that. Just a political climate and going in there and looking and seeing what people can find. That wasn't really even a feasible thing until about 200 years ago, since Mount Ararat, where a lot of people believe the ark actually would have landed, was an active volcano until about 200 years ago. So the soonest most people would have been able to go and start looking would have been the late 1800s, early 1800s. There's a lot of reasons that the ark may not even be able to be found. After the flood, put a lot less wood around, potentially. You wouldn't have been able to have fires, stuff to construct lodging. So the ark was probably dismantled over time until trees are able to fully grow again and mature to the point where they're able to be used. It probably decayed over time. You have to keep in mind, if looking at a timeline, which is roughly literally, the flood would have been around 3,000 to 4,000 years ago. You look at old barns that were built 200 years ago, nowadays with just wood, they're either decaying or they've taken a lot of time of upkeep to keep them around. And with the mountain range way it is, and with glacier movement throughout the centuries, there's a really good chance the ark could even been torn apart by those movements of glaciers. And as previously stated, with Mount Ararat having been a volcano at one point, you're potentially looking at volcanic eruptions, the ash from that, and the lava. So the ark getting burned up or covered completely, kind of like Pompeii. So in conclusion, God picked the only man who was still loyal to him, and that was Noah. Noah and his family were the ones that built the ark. He possibly used other labor and paid for other labor. It's estimated it would have taken around 70 to 100 years to build the ark with the technology that was available at the time. The flood covered the whole earth, and the only way for those mountaintops to be covered, like I said, was by the 25 feet of water, was for the whole earth to be flooded, and it couldn't have been just a localized event. The ark was massive. It, like I said, had 188 million cubic feet of space it covered, and that space, if used efficiently, was enough to hold not only the animals but the supplies to feed the animals and keep Noah and his family alive. And one of the people in the articles that I read, he said you don't have to have the physical evidence to be able to fully believe, because it takes real faith to believe in the things that you can't see sometimes. So being a Christian takes that faith, knowing that, but there is still so much scientific evidence that points to a worldwide catastrophe like the flood. And here are the references I had from my article. Thanks.